You know, it was an age of wisdom, it was an age of foolishness, an epic of belief, an epic of incredulity. With these incredible words, Charles Dickens just throws us right into the deep end, into a world that's literally tearing itself apart, a world of these stark, brutal opposites that are about to explode into revolution. So, in this explainer, we are plunging headfirst into the heart of Dickens' masterpiece. And we're not just looking at it as a story, but as this chilling chronicle of the French Revolution. We're going to navigate the chaos, the tragedy, the blood-soaked streets of Paris during the infamous Reign of Terror, and we'll witness an act of sacrifice that, honestly, still echoes through the ages. All right, to really get a handle on the explosion, you first have to understand the pressure cooker that had been building for centuries. Our story kicks off in 1775 in a society that is just completely fractured by this chasm of grotesque inequality. I mean, look at this. On one side, you have the aristocracy, living what Dickens basically calls a perpetual fancy ball. At Monseigneur's reception, their movements are so lazy, so detached that their little golden trinkets ring like precious little bells. Then on the other side, in the slum of Saint-Antoine, there's only one reality: hunger. And it's not just a feeling. Dickens writes about it like it's a physical, haunting presence. It's staring from empty chimneys, it's patched into their ragged clothing, it's rattling its dry bones in the streets. This single, arrogant phrase just captures the entire worldview of the French nobility. It's this slight twist on scripture that tells you everything you need to know. They had this absolute conviction that the world, all its people, all its resources, existed purely for their pleasure. Now, this wasn't just entitlement. They truly believed it was a divine right, an unshakable one, a belief that was about to be absolutely shattered. So, this world of extremes, it didn't just create poverty. No, it brewed something far more potent, far more toxic, this unquenchable thirst for revenge. I mean, years and years of being treated as less than human created a debt that they believed could only be paid in one currency: blood. And then you get this scene. A cask of wine breaks open in the street, and the starving people of Saint-Antoine just descend on it. It's like they're a single organism. They're so desperate they're on their knees, scooping the muddy wine from the paving stones with their bare hands. It's a moment of just pure animal desperation. But it's also a prophecy, right? The red wine stains the streets, it stains their hands, their faces, a grim foreshadowing of the red blood that will soon be flowing in those exact same gutters. And at the dark heart of this gathering storm sits one of literature's most formidable characters, Madame Defarge. See, she's not some wild-eyed fanatic. No. She is the embodiment of cold, patient, unforgiving rage, a fury that's been born from generations of suffering. While the men are talking and drinking in her wine shop, she just sits there, endlessly knitting. But this isn't just some idle hobby. Every single stitch, every knot is a name, an entry into her secret register of all the aristocrats and enemies of the people who were marked for death. This right here gets to the core of her terrifying philosophy. For her, vengeance isn't a crime of passion. Oh no, it is a dish served ice cold. She literally tells her fellow revolutionaries to keep their rage, their inner tiger and devil, chained up and hidden. You bide your time, you wait for the perfect moment, and only then do you strike with absolute merciless finality. And then the time comes. July 14th, 1789. The chains are broken. Dickens describes the storming of the Bastille not as a battle, but as a force of nature. The people become a living sea, a human ocean that has finally burst its dams, and it just sweeps over the city with this irresistible, terrifying force. The revolution has found its roar. Now, with the fall of the Bastille and the old regime, you might think, okay, here comes a new dawn of justice and freedom. But what actually emerges is something far, far more terrifying. A new order with its own symbol, its own grim sense of humor, and its own relentless, insatiable logic. The new icon of the Republic was La Guillotine. This sharp female, as they called it, becomes this object of morbid fascination and celebration. It's joked about as the national razor, the ultimate cure for all of society's ills. People wore little models of it as jewelry, actually replacing the cross. It became the new altar at which France worshipped, a symbol of regeneration through brutal, swift, and never-ending death. And pretty soon, the revolution starts to devour its own. Charles Darnay is the perfect example of this. Okay, so he's a French aristocrat, yes, But he was so disgusted by his family's cruelty that he renounced his name, his property, and fled to England. He comes back to France on a noble mission to save a former servant, and he's immediately arrested. Why? Simply for being an emigrant. Under the new law of the suspected, a decree that basically allowed for the arrest of anyone who even seemed counter-revolutionary, guilt or innocence didn't matter anymore. Your identity alone was enough to condemn you. 52. Just let that number sink in for a second. This wasn't the total number of people executed during the Reign of Terror. No, this was the number of condemned souls scheduled to ride in the death carts, the tumbrils, on one single day, the day of Charles Darnay's final sentencing. It was a daily spectacle of slaughter, a production line of death. But even in this pit of darkness, with the blade of the national razor just waiting to fall, the story finds its most profound light. An unlikely hero steps out from the shadows, and a chance for redemption emerges from the wreckage of a completely wasted life. So here we have two men who are physically mirror images of each other, but in terms of character, they are complete opposites. Charles Darnay is honorable, he's brave, he's everything a good man should be. And Sidney Carton, well, he's a shadow, a brilliant lawyer who has completely drowned his talent in alcohol and cynicism. He looks at Darnay and he sees the man he could have been. And, of course, both men happen to be in love with the same woman, Darnay's wife, Lucy Manette. And this, right here, is the question that really defines the final act of the novel. Can a man like Sidney Carton, a man who has thrown away every single gift he was ever given, find meaning? Can one life, freely given, atone for another that was just squandered? Well, Carton decides he's going to find out. Using his uncanny resemblance to Darnay, Carton comes up with this daring final plan. He pulls some strings, uses his connections to get into Darnay's cell, he drugs the condemned man, they swap clothes, and he arranges for Darnay to be carried out as if he were Carton, just come for a visit. And Carton, now dressed as Darnay, stays behind to meet the executioner. He's giving his life, not just for the woman he loves, but to give his own meaningless existence a final, profound purpose. As he's riding in that tumbril toward the guillotine, Carton is completely calm. He's actually comforting a frightened young seamstress who's also been condemned to die. And the words he recites, they're not words of despair. They're about rebirth. The cynical, hopeless man finds this incredible peace in his final moments, believing his sacrifice isn't an end, but a transformation. These are Carton's final thoughts as he approaches the scaffold. The idlest and most unpromising of men performs the most noble act imaginable. In giving up his life, he finally finds a peace and a value that he could never find through all his years of wasted brilliance. He achieves a kind of grace through this ultimate self-sacrifice. And the crowd, a crowd so used to seeing fear and defiance and anger, is just stunned by the serenity on his face. In his death, Carton is transformed. He becomes something more than just a drunken lawyer. He becomes a symbol of redemptive power, a quiet counterpoint to the roaring madness of the guillotine. And that's really the question Dickens leaves us with, isn't it? In a story that's all about the clash of opposites, love and hate, life and death, vengeance and sacrifice, it's Carton's final act that resonates the most. It suggests that maybe, even in the worst of times, the cycle of violence can be broken. Not by a sharper blade, but by a far, far better thing.